Hi there. Today we are talking about, I believe, one of the most difficult things that women have to face. Women who are building businesses, women who are starting new businesses, women who are running businesses. We're going to talk about how do you run the business while you're raising your kids, if you have kids. Welcome to the Second Act Collective. My name is Janet, and this is the topic we're diving into today. So I'm really going to talk about this from my own experience. Having started a business, my first business for 10 years, and in the process, I had 3 kids. And right now, the older two are teenagers, and the youngest is about 8. So it's a very different dynamics than when I had that first business, because right now I have an air consultant business and the dynamics are different. But I just wanted to share my lessons that I've learned from that time that I had the first business, even up to now. And I would say my first lesson that I want to share with you is that time and energy and focus are 3 different things. We hear a lot about time management. How do you manage your time so you can run the business and raise your kids the way you want to raise them? It's a constant, struggle for a lot of women because we want to be there for our kids. We also want to build these businesses. But I also believe that, there is time management, there's also energy management, there's also focus management. It's so because a lot of times you might have the time, right? You might have time, but you might not have the energy. You might not have just the energy because of the mental and emotional drain that you're going through, and you feel so drained. You might have maybe the energy, but not have the time because your schedule is packed and there's a lot going on. With the kids, there's a lot going on with your business. And, it just seems like you never have those 3 things together. And yet they actually need to be managed. You might have the energy and the time, but you're just lacking focus because mentally you're exhausted, or mentally there are all these other things that are pulling on you, and you're just lacking focus at that time. So you have to learn, I think, as a mother with kids, and really doesn't matter how many kids you have. Of course, I think the more kids you have, the more the struggle it is. But you do have to learn how to manage the time. You have to learn how to manage your energy. You have to learn how to manage your focus. It's 3 distinct things because they all need to be managed. Because if one of them is not in proper alignment, it's very hard to be there for your kids. It's hard to be fully present when you need to be for your business. It's hard to run the business the way you want to run it. So I would say this is the first lesson that I would share with you, is know that these are 3 different things and they all have to be managed. And for you to really have a successful life, which means you are there for your kids, you are also doing your business and running it, and it's profitable, and you are enjoying your life, you need to manage all 3. All right, so what is the next one? The next one is what you need to know as a mother as well is the seasons that your kids are in. A lot of times when we start our businesses or even, as the businesses are going, it's easy to not think about what season are my kids in, right? So this is, if you're thinking of starting, I think it's important that you look at that. Because I would say from my experience, when I started, my kids were very young. Actually, I started my first business when my middle son, who is my second child, was just born. So I was juggling, a newborn, starting this new business because I just left corporates, and, I was an employee and I was starting my own thing with my husband. And I was juggling the late nights of staying up with a newborn, the breastfeeding that is required, that nobody wants to talk about, but it's a reality that we have to face as women. And I also had a 3-year-old daughter at that time. My oldest was 3 years old. And it was a lot. It was a lot of juggling. And I don't know, looking back, I'm like, would I have started at that time? I don't know. But for my situation, I felt like it was, I start now or never because I could not think of myself going back to work for someone at my schedule, just not being flexible and having two kids at home. So that's kind of what was the push for me. It was more of a survival thing. Like I needed to do this so that uh, I can be home with my kids and really be able to juggle the life that I had. So if you're starting, this is something to look into, right? What season are my kids? Am I going to have the energy to do this? Am I going to have the capacity to start this business? Because also something else that happens with the business when you're starting, the first year or two, depending on the business, a lot of times you're really hustling. You're doing long hours. You are staying up late, right? Because it's like a baby as well. This new business is honestly like a baby. It's very demanding when you're starting. So I think it's important that you look at that and consider, okay, what season are my kids and how is this going to affect how I manage my time? How is this going to affect my energy? And am I going to be able to be there emotionally? Because what you don't want is to start something and then find out you don't really have the capacity for it because you are being pulled in so many directions and you are everywhere. And then you end up having like an emotional breakdown, which can happen. And it happens to women a lot of times. And then they just quit the business like, well, I can't do this. I'm a failure. I cannot do the business. But it's because you might have started the business at the wrong season because of the family demands that you have. So that'll be the second lesson that I just want women out there to put that into consideration when you're starting, if you're starting. If you have a business already, you can kind of maybe, shuffle things around to accommodate the season that you're in. And the nice thing is that, your kids will grow up, they'll get a little older, and there won't be, the demands on you are not the same as when they are newborns on well, maybe, 2 or 3 years old. So it really depends with what age group the kids are and what your capacity can be at that time. The third thing is that there are things that happen in life, especially, and every mother knows this, I don't even have to mention it. They're going to be unplanned things that happen, right? Your kid is going to get sick. They're just emergencies that happen with kids that I think going into starting business, we don't actually think a lot about that. For example, my daughter had a lot of health issues when she was young. And that really was a push for me to start the business because I found myself, I could not be at a lot of doctor's appointments because I couldn't take off work as much. And that really, really was, I felt like I was falling into a depression while working. So that was a push for me to start. But there are a lot of unplanned stuff that happens. Kids get sick, the school closes, all this stuff that you kind of have to think about in advance. As in, if you're starting the business yourself and you're kind of designing the business, you have that opportunity to think about those things like, okay, what do I do if I have to be home with the kids, if this happens or that happens? So even though we're not wishing for the things to happen, we have to have that at the back of our minds that they're going to be things that are going to come up that you're going to need to address, and that will affect how you do your business. If your child has some disease or something that might require you to take time away from that business and kind of focus on them, those are things that we all need to consider. So because life happens and things happen, and I think the whole point of us starting the business most of the time is because we want to be able to have, flexible schedules so that we can address certain things that might be happening. Right, so let's move on to lesson 4, which is you can be home but not be present. So the whole point of us starting businesses for a lot of us women is, and for myself too, was that I wanted the flexible schedule. I wanted to be home with my kids so that I can be with them, for different things. So a lot of us are working from home. If you have an office or you're working from your kitchen table. And yeah, I have an office in my basement, but I sometimes just prefer working at my kitchen table because there's so much light in the kitchen. So anyway, but what I noticed is that even, that is the excuse of, it really was the reason or excuse that I wanted to start the business. But I would find myself over the years, especially when we had projects that were so busy and, there was a lot that was required for me to do. You have a big project you're working on, and you just find yourself that you are doing things honestly like a robot because your mind is on that project, on spreadsheets, on whatever you're working on. And you're physically home, but you're not really there emotionally, mentally, you're not there. So you might be doing things with the kids, right? Running around, picking them up, doing this, doing homework and that. And your head, your mind, you are somewhere else. And that is easy, especially when you're working from home, because it becomes very hard to separate your home life, your work, which is like, your office is in the basement, to your family life, which is upstairs in your kitchen. So it's important that we pay attention to those seasons. And I also think if you have something that is, that you're working on, and maybe for that week, you're really what my kids call locked in. I think it's so funny. But it's, when you're focused on something, I think it's good to tell your family that I have this project that I'm working on. It's going to be intense for the next week or 2 weeks. So I just want you to know ahead of time that I'm going to be working on this, and it's kind of, occupying my mind a lot. So I think if you do that and your family's aware, okay, mommy is busy and she has this going on, but they know that it's not forever. It's just for that 1 week or 2 weeks, whatever time that you have told them. I think it makes it easy on your kids, or really on your family in general, that this is, you're working on this and you're kind of logged in for this time. And you might kind of be absent-minded sometimes, because you do find yourself being absent-minded and really working on I'm recording. All right, I have to start this one. How many do I have? Okay. Dylan, you can't make noise in there, please. I just said to stop. Now I'm starting. Can you please go downstairs and read or something? I need to leave soon, so I just have a few minutes before I have to go. Okay, one. Are you gone? Go, go, go. You make a lot of noise when you walk, so. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right, so let's talk about another lesson that I want to share with you, which is you can be home but not be present, right? So earlier on, we talked about the focus, that mentally you can be somewhere else while your body's there. And that happens a lot when we work from home. And the separation between your work, which is in, your office is in the basement, mine is in the basement, or wherever it is you're working. And the separation between your work life and your family life can start to blur, and you don't kind of separate the two. And I know this happened to me a lot of times when I had like projects, big projects that we're working on. My mind is like on the financials, whatever that I was working on for business. And, I had to pick up the kids from the bus and do homework and cook dinner. And you're not fully there because your mind is not there. So you really have to learn to separate the two. Like, okay, when it's 5 o'clock or whatever, 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, whatever time you pick up the kids, you're going to leave the work behind, and mentally and emotionally. And try to focus on being present with your kids. And something else that I also realized was good to do is to let my family know that, I'm working on this project and it's taking a lot out of me, and I kind of need to be locked in, which is the term my kids use, my teenage kids use that term. Locked in means I'm going to be focused for such a time, maybe a few days or whatever. And when you tell them, and everybody kind of knows that this is what's happening, I think it makes it better, that they understand why you might be absent-minded sometimes. It's because they know you're working on these things, but it's also not forever, right? It's just for that time that you're doing it. And I think it helps the family kind of work through those seasons when you do have to hustle, when you have things that are going on at work, because the reality is that they are, which is our next point. My next point is there are seasons of hustling that are going to happen. And in that time, again, you want to inform your family. But what you want to be careful about is that they're not forever. So you don't want to be hustling for a year and kind of ignoring your family and not truly being there. But if you have something you're working on for a week, 2 weeks, whatever, and they're aware of it, that's okay. And if you are building the business, the first year or two, yeah, there's hustling, right? But I think when those seasons of hustling are happening, you really need to learn to then manage your time, manage your energy, manage your focus, really separates yourself, your work from your home life. And that takes discipline. So the seasons of hustling require you to be very disciplined in your thought life, in how you think, in how you manage time, because you don't want, your kids are not waiting to grow up when you're done building your business. So you wake up and they're like 2 years older and you're like, oh, well, how did time pass? Because a lot of things you end up just doing like with no thoughts, just like a robot, because you're used to doing it. So we don't want that for our families. We don't want that for our kids. So it requires self-discipline. It requires managing of time, managing of your thinking. Also, even in that hustle season, you don't want, because your emotions are pretty high too, and if you're starting something, this business, a lot of times you don't have the cash flow coming in. So that can, bring up a lot of emotions that you end up being very emotional and reactive, even to your family, when they have nothing to do with it. So it's good to be aware of that, to just know, okay, in my season of hustling, I need to manage my emotions. I need to manage my time. I need to manage and tell my family this is what's going on, so they can also give you some grace, so you can, do what you need to do. And I think the next lesson would be learn to have a schedule that you honor. And when I say honor, meaning you really try to keep on that schedule, to keep doing what you said you're going to do, right? So you take it seriously, because a lot of things when you're building a business or you're in business, if they are not scheduled, they don't happen. You have to manage your kids' schedule, your schedule, the family as a whole schedule, the kids' activities, school schedules, the doctor's appointments, managing a home, cooking, cleaning, all that stuff. Like life then ends up like it somehow, which is not, doesn't sound fun, but there has to be a schedule. Otherwise you will go insane yourself. So scheduling things is important, because it does protect what matters. So there are certain things like your family time should be scheduled and protected and not compromised. Just like you don't compromise your meetings at work, right? If you set up a meeting with someone, you're not just gonna go ahead and cancel it, right? Unless if something happens. So you want to treat your family schedule the same way, with the same intensity, the same, kind of attitude of, I'm not just going to put this aside because something else that can make me more money has come up. Because your family matters at the end of the day, actually more than your business. They're the ones who will be there for you in your old age, when things are not well, when things are good. We don't want to compromise our family time for money. So you have to learn to schedule, and you have to learn to keep that schedule so that your life and your family life your business can grow well, and you and your family can also have a relationship. And the last thing I want to talk about is the separation, learning to separate. And these things kind of blend in together. But you have to learn to separate uh, your work life and your family life. Like there has to be a clear separation, which I touched on earlier on. Like, don't bring your work stuff, your issues of building a business or running the business into your home life. And it's not easy. I speak from experience, so I know it is not easy. You get annoyed or upset with the person you're working with, a contract or whatever, and you can bring that home. You are worried about the cash flow, you can bring that home. And again, if you're working from home, it's even worse to manage that separation because you are in the house that you live in and work in, and there's really like no separation like someone coming from an office. So for a lot of women who are working at home, it's important that you learn to do that, to have that separation, to separate yourself, to say, at such and such a time, I'm cutting off work stuff, and I will see this tomorrow, and I'll think about it tomorrow. And I will not let my emotions about what happened during the work hours interfere with my family life. Again, that takes discipline. And a lot about running your business when you're raising kids is a lot of discipline, mental discipline, emotional discipline, time discipline. Like, just a lot of discipline is required. But I think that's also the fun thing. It's very challenging. I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy to raise a family while you're building a business or while you're running one. It is not. And honestly, it is very challenging. So you have to go in knowing that this is not going to be easy. And there are days you might want to quit. You might want to say, you know what, forget that business. But you don't have to, as long as you kind of put some of the stuff that I've been talking about in place. It helps you to get through those seasons, and to also know it is a season. The kids do grow up and things get easier. Your business also grows up because it's like a child, and things get easier. So everything has a learning curve, and giving yourself the grace in that learning curve that you're learning this, because there's no manual for it. Right? There's no manual for how to raise your kids or you have a business, because kids are so different, right? We can give advice, but your kids are going to have their own thing that you're going to have to deal with, that you're going to have to manage. And so it's honestly just having the grace of God to manage it, and a lot of prayer is how I honestly go through a lot of this, is just asking God for help, because sometimes it is very, very difficult. But that is also the fun part of life, because I think there's also a lot of personal development that happens when we tend to do these things. But that's all I wanted to share with you today. And I hope you find this helpful, and I hope you're encouraged to go after your dreams that you have. If you're, changing into a different business, leaving corporate into transitioning into starting a business, I hope the lessons help you to see the things you kind of need to look into, to be aware of, but not discourage you from starting, or not discourage you from continuing what you have. So if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe, and join our community, the Second Act Collective community. The link is in the description. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.